there's any snow lying on the ground, we could get down to -12 or -13. So a frosty, icy start for some tomorrow morning, but for most it's another bright, fine, crisp winter's day, probably a sunnier day than recent days. Some wet weather close to the south coast, perhaps affecting the Channel Isles, and more sleet and snow showers coming into eastern England, snow showers continuing over northern Scotland. Again, it's going to be cold, just about struggling above freezing for most places, but feeling colder in the wind across the north and a brisk breeze picking up along the south coast as well. More of those snow showers coming in during Wednesday night across northern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. So again, it could be icy on Thursday morning. Still have warnings in place until Friday, actually. And then it's just another fine, bright, crisp winter's day for the majority on Thursday. Lots of sunshine, eventually lifting the temperatures just about above freezing. But again, potentially quite icy with these snow showers coming into eastern England, northern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Temperatures still well below average and temperatures dropping quickly again through the evening. So a frosty start to Friday, but signs of a change as things turn wetter on Sunday, windier, but also milder.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
It's Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Mark Steyn. Tonight, tomorrow and Thursday, a busy show in my Big Opinion monologue. Schools and businesses closed because of a bit of snow. Everyone and their granny is on strike, and customer service has gone back 20 years. Britain isn't working. More on that in a moment. Households in the North London borough of Islington will have their access to heating and hot water restricted in a bid to save cash. Is this the start of energy rationing, a common sense economy, or a dangerous precedent? Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak announces a new master plan to tackle illegal migrant crossings, including a deal with Albania. More on that shortly, but will it work? We'll speak to top Tory MP who wants to get tough on immigration, Jonathan Gullis. I'm told he's in a cab on his way to the studio right now. Gullis, not Sunak. And not Ursula von der Leyen either. The EU folks caught up in a corruption scandal. Surely not. We'll hear the gory details from legal philosopher Eva Vladinderbroek. Lots to get through, including my prescription to get Britain back on its feet in my Big Opinion monologue. And I'm going for it tonight, folks. I'm not pulling my punches. But first, a welcome return to Polly Middlehurst and the headlines.
Good to be back, Mark. Thank you, and good evening to you. The top story tonight on GB News: the Prime Minister has promised to bring in new laws to tackle illegal immigration, saying anyone who comes to the UK illegally will not be allowed to stay. Making a raft of announcements in the House of Commons today, Rishi Sunak vowed to eliminate the backlog in asylum claims by the end of next year and to halve the cost of housing migrants. He plans to relocate 10,000 migrants staying in hotels to empty holiday parks, former student halls and surplus military sites.
It is unfair that people come here illegally. It is unfair on those with a genuine case for asylum when our capacity to help is taken up by people coming through and from countries that are perfectly safe. It is unfair on those who migrate here legally when others come here by cheating the system.
The RMT Union General Secretary has been apologising for disruption to train services as 4 weeks of industrial action began today. Around 40,000 members are striking today, tomorrow, Friday and Saturday, with more walkouts to come over the festive period. Union members rejected the latest pay offer by Network Rail of a 5% pay rise this year and another 4% in 2023. The Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, asked the union to reconsider. Now, police in Jersey say they suspect gas was behind an explosion that happened at a block of flats on the island at the weekend. Earlier, it was confirmed the number of people who'd lost their lives in the accident, which happened in St Helier, had risen to 7. The island's police chief has named 2 people who are still missing. They are Ken and Jane Ralph, a couple in their 70s. And a 6-year-old boy remains in a critical condition in hospital after he fell through an icy lake in Solihull. 3 other boys, aged 8, 10 and 11, died after being pulled out of the icy water in Kingshurst. Members of the public applauded a group of officers from West Midlands Police who marched through the town to lay flowers in tribute to the boys. Balloons, soft toys and candles were left after a community vigil last night. Scientists in the United States have for the first time used nuclear fusion to generate more power than was consumed in the process of the fusion itself. Nuclear power plants currently rely on fission, which splits atoms, releasing harmful radiation. But fusion energy, which pushes atoms together, is safer, sustainable, clean and cheap. Scientists say the decades-long international effort could one day lead to unlimited global energy and ultimately help in the fight against climate change. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Time for Mark Steyn with Mark Dolan.
Isn't it great to have Polly back? Britain isn't working, quite literally. A new report from the Institute for Public Policy Research has found that more people are off sick from work in the UK than at any time since records began, and that long COVID, whatever that is, and mental health conditions are some of the biggest reasons why. The number of working-age adults who are out of the labour market has risen to 2.5 million. Meanwhile, youth unemployment is creeping up as well, with research from the excellent City and Guilds in their Youth Misspent report revealing that 13% of 18 to 24-year-olds are currently unemployed, and wait for it, a further 3% are economically inactive, again, down to issues like mental health. That's almost 1 million young adults out of work and out of education across the UK. Almost 1 million. Meanwhile, 25% of young people feel turned off from working for life altogether, with almost 10%, that's 227,000 people, saying they never intend to start working. Holy moly. Now, I always use this privileged broadcast platform to talk the country up. I love Britain, and our future is potentially glorious. But right now we're heading in a worrying direction. A relatively small amount of snow, for example, has caused chaos in our great cities. And as I travelled through the capital on my motorbike on Sunday nights, not the best mode of transport, I'll grant you, it was pretty clear that many of the roads, including main roads, had not been gritted, even though the Met Office has been warning of snow for over a week. The public bodies that are responsible for things like road gritting seem to have joined the army of public sector workers asleep at the wheel, or not even at the wheel at all. Our infrastructure has been grinding to a halt for months now. Try getting a passport application done, or a provisional driving licence from the DVLA. There's no godly reason why the pandemic should have stopped these things from happening, and there is certainly no excuse now. Now, there was heavy snow in parts of the country, but one school in Zone 3 of central London has been closed for the last 2 days. This after just a few hours of snow on Sunday night and a bit on Monday morning. They were closed today. Of course, we've brought all of this on ourselves. We set the ridiculous precedent of closing schools during the pandemic to curtail a virus that posed almost zero threat to children and young people. So if you indulge in that level of mind-numbing idiocy, don't be surprised when such madness prevails in the future. I've got no doubt that there are voices within teaching unions now arguing that perhaps schools should just close for the rest of the year and break up early because it's a bit cold. We put these people in charge for 2.5 years, and their work-shy hysteria now seems to shape public policy. Back in the good old days, when the weather was cold, people just got on with it, even if it took hours to get to work. We didn't have the self-indulgent mechanism of work from home. People just cracked on. The same with colds and even bad flus. Yes, if you were a wreck, you stayed in bed, but otherwise you dragged yourself in and you contributed to the economy. Now, one positive COVID test and that's a week off, even if you feel fine, which most of you will, because COVID, though potentially nasty, has always been a predominantly mild virus. Many are suffering worse with flu at the moment. And meanwhile, everyone and their mother is planning strike action. Nurses, firefighters, civil servants, ambulance drivers, you name it. Now, I sympathise with all of them, but they are effectively asking the government to compensate them for inflation. Sorry, but it can't. Not only is the cupboard bare from the cost of lockdown crisis, but trying to beat inflation with pay rises is like using a flamethrower to put out a fire. For the government to yield to these pay requests, which I've got no doubt are justified, people are struggling, well, it would effectively mean the government fighting an arms race with inflation, something which history proves you will always lose. Here is the painful truth. The country's broke. We're running a deficit, which means more goes out than comes in, and the national debt is 2.1 trillion. The international bond markets just won't let us borrow any more money. And inflation is high, which reduces the value of our income and raises the cost of energy and essential goods. And there's nothing the government can do about it. How did we get here? Well, we shut the country down for 2.5 years and paid perfectly healthy people to stay at home in what is, my view, a failed experiment to stop a virus non-fatal to almost everyone. We arrogantly printed £500 billion, thinking that we were such a rich, powerful country that we could afford to do that. Well, it turns out we could not afford it. Biggest I told you so in history. But here we are. If we carry on like this, expecting the state to do everything, overestimating the spending power of this country, expecting to stay at home whenever there's a bit of snow or if you've got a sniffle, if we carry on feeling sorry for ourselves and calling it mental health, the country will continue to decline. People playing the mental health card does a great disservice to those who are truly suffering and who deserve and need support for their actual mental health. The rate of young men's suicide, for example, is an appalling tragedy and must be addressed. But with 1 million job vacancies, any Brits that can work need to. Everyone's got to put a shift in because we are currently sinking deeper into the economic quicksand because of a deep misunderstanding about the role the state can play in our lives, which has been wildly inflated by the pandemic. Britain has embarked on a tragic race to the bottom. If we don't sharpen up, tool up and toughen up and get back to work en masse and work hard, long-term irreversible decline beckons. It's time to save Britain from becoming a crap country, but time is running out. What's your view? GB Views at gbnews.uk. I'm delighted to welcome the leader of the SDP, William Clouston, for his reaction. Hello, William.
Hi, Mark.
I'm really worried about what's happening to the country. People are staying at home in their droves. Some are genuinely ill. Some have genuine mental health issues. But I think there are thousands of skivers out there.
I think you make some fair points about the what we see as a sort of collapse, post-pandemic collapse in productivity. And I agree with many of your points. People need to get back to work. If you look at the data on the number of people in certain government departments that aren't actually turning up, still very low. Foreign Office, for instance, fewer than half of the staff actually turn up to work. They're working from home. And I don't believe that you can work at home as effectively as you can if you actually turn up. So it's vital, I agree with you, it's vital that we get people back to work, as it is vital that we deal with over 5 million people on out-of-work benefits. But, you know, I think that I don't agree with everything you say about the state's role. I think the state has a role in training, and some of these strikes that you see now are, I think, inevitable given the sort of macroeconomic conditions we have. The ONS produced data this morning that demonstrated that public sector workers have basically seen real wage falls of over 8% in this last year. You've got to remember, Mark, that that's in combination with those households facing very, very high electricity bills and energy bills. Food inflation is running at about 15%. And, in those circumstances, not surprising, with mortgage costs going up as well, that the workers require a wage increase.
And, you know, on that we can agree. I've mentioned in my big opinion monologue that I sympathise with those going on strike. They're suffering a real terms pay cut, but that's the issue for those in the private sector as well. And you don't tackle inflation by giving people pay rises.
Well, I'd agree with you in if it were the case that inflation was caused, this round of inflation was caused by wages pushing inflation up, but it's not the case.
Not going to help, William, is it?
No, this present round of inflation has three basic causes. It's caused by a sort of post-pandemic global supply chain issue, which has pushed prices up as supplies have been interrupted. It's been caused by inflation of energy prices because of Putin's war. And to some extent, it's a little bit of a technical issue. It's been caused by the combination during the pandemic of a government running very, very loose monetary policy simultaneously with the loose fiscal policy. We shouldn't be surprised we get inflation after that, but it's not caused. I would totally reject the idea that this present round of inflation is caused by wage increases. After all, the ONS data that we have today has demonstrated that real wages are falling.
Yes, but if everyone gets a pay rise, then that will be inflationary, surely.
It will, but I would urge, I've urged, it's strange, the timing of this. I wish we had a government, Mark. In the summer, the RMT was asking for 7%. They rejected it. Had they taken it, it would have looked a pretty good deal, actually. And part of the problem in not accepting that request from the RMT, many of whom, that their workers haven't had a pay increase in 2 or 3 years, was that we don't actually have a government. We've had 3 Secretary of States for Transport in since August. So you've got no one to negotiate with. The railway system is a shambles. Who are the RMT and ASLEV actually negotiating with? You've got 3 or 4 different bodies. You've got the government interfering. You've got 14 different franchise companies. The thing is a mess. And I would say it simply isn't worth resisting a reasonable pay demand from the RMT because patronage is falling. Patronage on the railways is 20% lower than it was pre-pandemic when the railways are running. And the macroeconomic costs of this are just not worth it. So yet again, we have another example of the Tories, not seeing the bigger picture, not seeing both sides of the tennis net. It simply isn't worth it. They should settle.
And briefly, William, the SDP are very good on societal and cultural issues. We've got 2.5 million people of working age that can't work because they have mental health issues or long COVID or other problems. Meanwhile, 10% of young people are suggesting in a recent survey that they may never work, that they may never even begin to join the jobs market. This is a cultural issue and it needs to be tackled. Otherwise, we're all doomed, aren't we?
I totally agree with you, and I'm glad you've raised it. We're sort of alone in arguing that many of our problems are cultural. Many of our economic problems are actually cultural, really. And I look at this society. Eric Kaufman produced a really brilliant report on young people's attitudes to politics for Policy Exchange a couple of weeks ago. Some harrowing picture in there, Mark, of some of the data was astonishing. Something like 42% of young women feel anxious or depressed most of the time. My answer is that if you destroy the foundations of society, which a lot of progressives have done, you remove, we've got rid of religion, we don't attend church, we've downgraded and deprivileged the family, you get rid of, the industrial job has gone because we've shipped all those jobs abroad. In that environment, the sort of selfish environment, me-first environment, this country's doing as well as any country could, given that. And I think until we get a party that is actually going to speak up for the traditional family, mum and dad bringing up their own kids, I think things will just get worse.
Great to have you on the show, William. Do join us again soon. William Clouston is the leader of the SDP. Coming up, Rishi Sunak's new immigration plan. Will it work? We'll be joined by the Tory MP Jonathan Gullis, who is on his way in a cab as we speak. He wants to get tough on immigration. Will this deal with Albania do the trick? We'll get to that shortly. Also, the EU caught up in a corruption scandal? Surely not. And after this, households in North London are to have their access to heating and hot water restricted to a few hours a day. What a shocker. We'll investigate that next.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Mark Dolan in for Mark Steyn tonight, tomorrow and Thursday. Welcome back to the show. Lovely to have your company. Council and private tenants are having their hot water rationed. Is this a worrying development? We'll discuss that shortly. And an outrageous corruption scandal in the EU, of all places. I'm so shocked. All of that shortly, but first, let's get to some of your feedback. Stephen says, blimey, that's not the half of it, mate, in terms of Britain losing its work ethic. Leslie says many people who joined the workforce in 2020 are now used to taking lots of sick leave due to catching COVID and isolating multiple times. They have never understood what real work is, the work ethic, in the same way that their older colleagues do. Ben, voting Tory is to blame. There you go, to the point. My next guest won't be happy about that. And finally, yes, we've gone down the drain, says Spade on Twitter. Keep those opinions coming. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Now, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, remember him? Well, he's celebrating because he's outlasted Liz Truss. And he's promised to bring in new laws to tackle illegal immigration. Telling Parliament today, anyone who comes to the UK illegally will not be allowed to stay. He announced a new small boats force to increase the number of raids carried out by immigration officers. New sites, including disused holiday parks, former student halls and surplus military sites to house asylum seekers, with 10,000 spaces identified, costing half of what the hotels cost. He's also going to double the number of asylum caseworkers, with a promise to abolish the backlog by the end of next year. And finally, he announced a new agreement with Albania to speed up the return of asylum seekers to the safe country. Here's what he had to say.
He will embed Border Force officers in Tirana Airport for the first time ever, helping to disrupt organised crime and stop people coming here illegally. Second, we will issue new guidance for our caseworkers to make it crystal clear that Albania is a safe country. Third, one of the reasons we struggle to remove people is because they unfairly exploit our modern slavery system. So we will significantly raise the threshold someone has to meet to be considered a modern slave. Lastly, we will change how we process Albanian illegal migrants with a new dedicated unit expediting cases within weeks, staffed by 400 new specialists. Over the coming months, thousands of Albanians will be returned home, and will keep going with weekly flights until all the Albanians in our backlog have been removed.
Will it work? Let's speak to Jonathan Gullis, Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent. Mr Gullis, welcome to the studio.
Good to see you, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well. Great to have you on the show. The only policy that looks like it will really move the dial is the Albania policy. Does what you've heard today go much beyond that?
I think the Albania side of things is a really positive step in the right direction. To hear that we were only rejecting 45% of Albanian cases, yet the EU average is around the 98% mark, it's quite petrifying. The Prime Minister's correct that we should get to that 100% mark and ultimately make sure those people who come from a NATO member, EU applicant country are returned immediately. And I think we'll all believe it when we see the first plane taking off, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of lefty lawyers out there hungry to try and put God knows how many appeals in. But the fact that the Albanian Prime Minister himself has said that it's a safe country, the fact that the Albanian Embassy Minister over here at the Home Affairs Select Committee said there's no reason for people to come here, they're economic migrants, the fact that you can get a Wizz Air flight for £28, as Lee Anderson, my friend, has rightly pointed out, means that those people choosing to come here and paying £5,000 or more because they don't want to present who they are at Border Force, and these people need to be gone. But the processing is, of course, an important part. My concern with this particular thing, however, is we know we're still accepting about 7 in 10 who go through that. So I don't think the British public will stomach 70% of the 44,000 being approved to stay here. So whilst I'm glad we're going to speed up processing, the rejection stamp needs to be dusted off and stamped on quite a lot of these cases and get these people, hopefully, to Rwanda as soon as possible, if not returned to where they've come from.
However, none of this happens without the largesse of the French government, and that's surely a little optimistic.
I won't lie to your viewers, Mark, because they're sound people and they know that we've spent around, what, £200 million over the last 5 to 6 years, and the numbers have actually gone up. And I know that the Prime Minister's in a difficult spot. He has to build relationships with members across the world. He has to obviously maintain that professional relationship. So I get that he's in a much trickier spot than I am to be much freer.
So you can be honest about Mr Macron?
So I think Mr Macron has turned a blind eye to this. I think the fact that they're being ferried through France as quickly as possible and into small boats is something he's happy to just let carry on and make that become Britain's problem. Actually, it's a French problem, and if they don't stop this downstream, all it means is that, you know, those northern French towns get destroyed, get taken over, build a bad reputation, and ultimately the pressure's then put on our border force, our public services, our NHS, our school places, and it's just not right. And so when it comes to the good news is we're going to have British boots in Calais finally, and I think that will be always a good wake-up call for the French to actually see how the British operate, a lot more efficient, a lot more sort of get-up-and-go spirit, and I think our border force can teach their guys a thing or two. For example, you don't sit in a jeep and watch a dinghy take off. You try and stop the dinghy from going into the water.
Yes, I mean, do we know how much of an impact these measures will actually have? Because clearly the Albanian factor is going to be, I think, quite transformative. If you think that upwards of 1,000 people have been arriving illegally across the Channel on a daily basis, then that possibly eliminates a third of those people if they're Albanian. But what about the other 600 or so folk? How many of those will you know, those crossings be prevented by what we've heard today?
Well, what I like is that if you're landing here illegally and the Prime Minister made clear new legislation coming in the new year, then you will be deported.
Which is an Australian policy, isn't it? If you enter the country illegally, you will not get asylum.
And you will not have a right of return to this country if you try again, and obviously you lose your right if you try and come back a second time. So I think this is you lose, you know, those rights again to even try and applicate. We're just going to put you straight off the boat, on the plane, and off you go. These are the type of things that we should have been doing and we are now doing, and I think we'll be music to people's ears. But again, I understand the scepticism that some people say, we've heard the talk, we need to actually see the action. But I will give Rishi credit where he ultimately deserves. The amount of conversations I've had with him, colleagues have had with him, the level of detail he's been able to go to in the end-to-end process He really has devoted a lot of time, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for making this a #1 priority, quite clearly to me and to my colleagues.
Although talk of flights to Rwanda is surely a little optimistic, have you been enjoying happy hour in the House of Commons?
Well, all I will tell you, Mark, is that tomorrow I'm introducing a 10-minute rule bill that says that we should be ignoring the European Court of Human Rights, as we did with prisoner votes all those years ago, and the flight should be going to Rwanda. We're a sovereign government. This 2019 Conservative Party was elected to take back control of our laws, our borders and our money. So let's use a week's worth of hotel funding to buy our own planes so we don't get woke commercial airlines trying to play party politics on Twitter. Let's get these people onto after Rwanda and offshore as soon as possible. Because what's the European Court going to do? They're simply going to moan and groan from their armchairs in Strasbourg, where we shouldn't be concerned about what they're doing at all.
And of course, this was a Blairite policy, didn't we? We saw that, I think, in the second term of New Labour, and that's why we haven't really got the sovereignty with which to do what many want. However, it wouldn't be great for Britain's global reputation, Britain's standing as a caring nation, if we do chuck out the European Court of Human Rights.
Well, I tell you what, I've heard this about Britain's reputation so many times, and,
we'd be worse than Russia, wouldn't we, if we chucked it away?
No, I don't think we would be worse than Russia, because I think this country's proven time and again it steps up. 450,000 people have been eligible to come to this country through all the different safe legal routes: Hong Kong, Syria, Afghanistan, and and Ukraine. Obviously, this country goes above and beyond every single time. We see that in Stoke-on-Trent, the fact that for years, decades, we've been a member of the voluntary, as it was then, asylum dispersal scheme. We had 803 economic migrants in our city before the hotels that were starting to be used, which is outrageous. And I presented my petition tonight to demand that hotels end being used to Stoke-on-Trent. In fact, the Prime Minister's own constituents have signed my petition, so they clearly have the people of Stoke-on-Trent's back. And I was pleased to hear that Stoke-on-Trent will be, I'm sure, one of the first ones to get their hotels cleared, because, as I say, Scotland, where 32 out of 33 local authorities have never been part of the voluntary dispersal scheme, but they love to virtue signal those Scottish nationalists. I'm sure that they will all gladly open up their local areas and their hotels, and then they can come and hear what it's like to have the impact on their schools and their health services.
Of course, the SNP enjoy great popular electoral support. The same can't be said for the Tories. Last one before you go, which is the latest poll giving Labour a 300-seat majority, the Tories with less than 70. This is an existential threat to your party. Your reaction?
So first of all, I don't actually generally get worried about polls, because the only poll that matters is polling day, and we're not there yet, and we've got plenty of time to face the electorate to show that we are competent. And obviously the last 3-4 months, I'm sure we've tested the patience of the public on that. But now we've got to deliver. And you are right, if we do not deliver on small boats, particularly in the Red Wall, particularly in places like Stoke-on-Trent North, overwhelmingly voted to leave the European Union, overwhelmingly lent their vote to the Conservative Party because they were sick of a North London Metropolitan Elite Labour Party trying to tell them, what to do and how to think. If we don't deliver on this, yes, I will be gone at the next election, and the Prime Minister, if Stoke North falls, won't be the Prime Minister, he'll be the leader of the opposition. So we've got to deliver, and that's why I warmly welcome what's been announced, but the devil's in the detail, and the delivery will determine for me whether or not, we win the trust of the public. But what I do know is a Labour Party with a shadow Home Secretary who loves to hold up signs saying refugees welcome will only see those small boats double, treble, quadruple over time, and a leader who was elected, obviously, to bring in free movement despite his desperate attempt to try and sound as tough on immigration as possible. The fact that those empty benches on the Labour Party today, Mark, they were all in their North Islington chai latte bars trying to hide away, scoffing down their quinola rather than actually to talk the tough rhetoric. So they realise they've got a leader who's trying to appeal to a section of voters they think are racist. I say they're the overwhelming majority of this country who aren't racist. They just want control of their borders, control of their laws, and they just want fairness, and that's what we all want at the end of the day.
Well, it could be that those Labour MPs are getting ready for power, but I know that your plan is to stop them. Thank you so much for dashing across London to join us tonight. Jonathan Gullis, MP. By the way, your constituency is
Stoke-on-Trent North.
Stoke-on-Trent North. We missed the crucial north bit. Is there a south as well?
Central and south.
There you go. Well, listen, it's all about north, isn't it? So my thanks to the Tory MP for Stoke-on-Trent North, Jonathan Gullis. And your reaction, please, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Coming up, a corruption scandal that could cause huge damage to the EU. We'll discuss that shortly, but next, the People's Republic of Islington are rationing heating and hot water. Is this a dangerous precedent? We'll catch up with the writer and Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montfort. He's after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Coming up on Damberton tonight, are Harry and Meghan putting the royal family's personal safety at risk? Ex-Royal Protection Officer Di Davis thinks so. He'll battle the Sussex defenders in the clash. Plus, US political legatee Robert F. Kennedy Jr. launches his drive to bring COVID authoritarians to justice. Lawrence Fox takes down woke academics, and there's unfiltered opinion from Fleet Street icon Kelvin MacKenzie. That's Dan Wootton tonight, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big reaction to my big opinion monologue. Britain isn't working, quite literally. Well, Peter says, hi, Mark, I have to tell you I am a patriot of the UK. I've been through all this rubbish in the 70s. We worked to get ourselves out of the quagmire, but sadly, this is not my UK. The government has succeeded in making its citizens state-dependent, which was their aim. I'm ashamed of my country and the future looks grim for our indoctrinated kids. Thank you for that, Peter. Households in the North London borough of Islington will have their access to heating and hot water restricted in a bid to save cash. In a shock decision made by the council, private tenants, leaseholders and council residents across the borough will not have access to basic amenities like hot water and heating for up to 11 hours a day as part of the borough's new efficiency measures to reduce residents' energy costs. Is this the start of energy rationing, and is it a common-sense economy or a dangerous precedent? Let's speak to Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Mark. How's things?
I'm very well indeed. Look, all they're trying to do is bring down the cost of energy. Very sensible.
Well, they've offered the tenants a massive increase in prices or no hot water at all. which I think in current circumstances may just have to be, it may indeed be a reasonably sensible thing to do. The problem is that the tenants are, they're captured. They have nowhere else to go. Their hot water comes from the council, and so they're stuck. And this is the problem. As soon as you give control to the state, you run this risk that the state is going to shoot you in the back. We see this coming with smart meters, because smart meters will give people the ability to switch off your power when the wind isn't blowing, and there's no electricity. The government, it looks as though they're soon going to get their hands on on those smart meters. They will have. There will be a central ability to switch people off. So essentially, control is handed over. And yes, it is. There is no doubt, I think, that rationing will happen, because, as we found out in the last week, when the wind doesn't blow, we aren't going to have power. Fossil fuels are going. We were kept afloat over the last few days by coal and nuclear. But the coal and nuclear is going to be shut down over the next few years. So there will be nothing except the wind. And if we're lucky, something might come over the interconnectors from France. In reality, though, if we get a 3-week lull in the wind, there will be nothing. And at that point, they will start switching us off and we will be rationed. And it's quite frightening.
It has echoes of communist China, doesn't it? Give them an inch, the authorities, and they will take a mile.
Yeah, they are completely blind, I think, to what is going on in households. I was watching a committee in Parliament today talking about energy, and the consumer interest didn't come into it at all. They just didn't care. The only thing they care about is hitting this, if you like, this quasi-religious net zero target. They seriously believe that they're saving the planet, and that if some people freeze along the way, well, I think they view that as collateral damage. It's just unfortunate, but it's got to happen. And I'm actually rather scared by what our politicians are doing. They have completely lost sight of people suffering, and people are suffering this winter.
Although, Andrew, let me ask you whether it's really a problem if you can't have a hot bath at 4 in the morning. That's not exactly a privation, is it? If you look at what this local authority is planning to do, people will have access to hot water and the boiler for most of the day.
Yeah, of course. And there are people pointing out that people work shifts, and actually, as they come back from the night shift, would quite like to have a shower or a bath when they come home. I mean, this is a basic human requirement, that you can get hot running water when you need it. To say that you can't have it is preposterous, really. Now, as I said before, I think the price of power has gone up, and the council are stuck in a hard place. They probably do have to put up prices, but I think we probably have to sit back from this and look at the big picture, which is that we have, for the last 20 years, made a complete hash of energy policy. In a sane world, we would still have coal-fired power stations producing power cheaply so that people can have that basic requirement of heat, light, and hot water when they need it.
Although, of course, others would argue, Andrew, that with those policies, we have drastically reduced our carbon footprint. I've got one quick personal question for you. You're up there in Scotland. Whereabouts in Scotland, by the way?
I'm in Kinross.
Beautiful part of the world. You've got a radiator behind you. When's Nicola Sturgeon going to be switching it off?
Quite soon. She is scarily green. There are all sorts of things coming that really quite frighten me.
There you go. Look, it's great to have you on the show, Andrew. Thank you for sharing your wit and wisdom with us. Andrew Montford is the Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch. Thanks, Andrew. Well, we've been in touch with Islington Council. Well done, producer Melissa, for getting a response. And Councillor Una O'Halloran has told my team, We consulted residents and more than 2/3 of respondents, 67% backed the plan or wanted us to go further to reduce services. Communal heating systems don't currently allow every resident to make their own decisions about how much to use the boiler. Ultimately, in this instance, a difficult decision had to be made in the interests of the majority. My thanks to Islington for that response. Coming up, an outrageous corruption scandal in the EU. How much damage could this do to Brussels? Is this further evidence we're lucky to be out? It's a cracking story. You won't believe the details. Legal philosopher Eva Vladingerbroek joins us in 2 minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's Mark Dolan in for Mark Steyn. Tonight, tomorrow and Thursday, a joy to have your company. Brussels is in the grip of a growing corruption scandal over allegations that World Cup host Qatar lavish hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of cash and gifts on MEPs and officials to influence decision-making. Watchdogs say that it could be the most serious corruption scandal to hit Brussels in years. A series of at least 16 raids by Belgian police netted 5 people they said had allegedly committed offences of criminal organisation, corruption and money laundering. 600,000 euros is involved. Eva Kaili, a Vice President of the European Parliament and vocal defender of Doha, is now in police custody. What's going on? Let's speak to a good friend of the show. For reaction, legal philosopher Eva Vladingerbroek. Hi, Eva. Great to meet you for the first time.
Hi, Mark. So nice to meet you, too.
Oh, dear. The halo has slipped for the European Union.
Oh man, I think this is just such a funny story, to be honest with you. These people, I mean, so they took, supposedly, now they seized up to 1.5 million euros in cash from these people. So apparently, you know, the Social Democrats, because they're all in the Socialist and the Democrat group in the European Parliament, are the ones that Qatar seeks out to spread wonderful news about them. It's just such a funny story. All these moralists there in the European Parliament have really shown their true colors here.
Most certainly. Can you tell me about the number of people in Holland who are interested in Holland leaving the European Union? How much Euroscepticism is there in the Netherlands?
Well, sadly, not enough, because a lot of us are still very much afraid that things are going to go very wrong for us because we are such a small country. And the lies that you guys have been told, you know, that the UK would simply cease to exist if you would go through with Brexit. Well, those ones are the same ones that they tell us. And sadly, a lot of people are still falling for it. So instead, we are in the hands of these people who say that they want to protect democracy, who say that they want to protect the rule of law. And then when they are offered a big bunch of money, they just go ahead and they support people like, well, Qatar.
Do you think, Eva, that if more corruption is uncovered within the EU, this could add to Eurosceptic feelings on the continent and also a possible sovereign debt crisis? Because inflation is very high across the Eurozone. In fact, I think across the entirety of the Eurozone, it's higher than here in the UK. Germany's always been a rich country, it always will, but some of these other countries like Italy and France are in trouble. This project is not secure in the long term, is it?
No, it sure isn't. And I hope that this reaches beyond the question of finance, honestly. I hope that people start to wake up to the fact that even when, you know, not all MEPs are people who take bribes from corrupt nations, I do hope that they start to realize that these people are pushing for policies that are detrimental and actually are an actual threat to our democracy and to the rule of law. For example, just a week ago, the Dutch parliament voted in favor of a motion with a majority saying to the Dutch government, do not go to Brussels and sign for the digital identity project. What did our government do? They went ahead and they did it anyway. So really, you know, there is no democratic control. We just are giving up our sovereignty every single time. And the projects that these people push for in that monster that is the EU people should wake up to that and I would say get out as soon as possible.
Worrying developments in Germany as well, Eva. Tell me more.
Oh, yes. When we're talking about people protecting democracy and the rule of law, well, this example is one that is really going to blow your mind. So, well, there was obviously a bit of a problem in Germany. I think that most of you have seen that. There was a supposed coup d'etat that was being planned that the government in Germany was thankfully able to shut down. But what happened next is that the German Minister of Interior Affairs actually went ahead and said, well, in order to fight extremist thought and in order to rid basically the German government of public servants that have extremist ideas, mind you, that could be anything that they don't agree with, we should actually reverse, she said, the burden of proof. She literally said it. You can look it up. She said, we need to change the presumption of innocence into the presumption of guilt. And the fact that Germany now has a minister who says that, you know, blows my mind. It's the end of literally the rule of law. And when someone like Orban, for example, would have said the same thing, I'm sure it would have been nationwide news everywhere.
Yes, Germany has always had an intermittent relationship with freedom and democracy, as you will agree. Eva, brilliant to have you on the show, and we'll catch you, I hope, in a week's time. My thanks to Eva for a fascinating conversation. Lots of emails coming in. I'll get to those shortly. We're back tomorrow, I'm delighted to say, at exactly 8 o'clock. And we're going to be talking to Matthew Goodwin. He's a top academic. He'll be reacting to that story that at the moment, Labour are being predicted to win a 300-seat majority, with the Tories possibly having just under 70 seats. So we'll get his reaction. He's a very wise and clever man, as is Dan Wootton, best journalist in the country. And Dan, can't wait for the show tonight. What's happening?
Oh, stop it, Mark. Great show. I have enjoyed watching it. very much.
Thanks, man.
We've got some really interesting folk on tonight, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Amazing.
Now, he is, of course, the son of RFK, the nephew of JFK, but over the past couple of years has become one of the voices speaking out against the health establishment in America. He's live with me tonight, Mark. I think it's going to be fascinating.
Absolutely unmissable. Dan Wootton tonight. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 9 o'clock. Always agenda-setting television. I'm back tomorrow at 8. See you then. Here's the weather.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Turning cold once more out there under largely clear skies. Could be icy almost anywhere, but particularly we've got snow showers over northern Scotland, and there is some wet weather coming into the southwest courtesy of this area of low pressure. There's some mild air mixed in with that, but it's never quite reaching us. We are staying blue, we're staying cold. Cold front bringing more snow showers across northern Scotland, so a further few centimetres possible here. A few wintry showers scattered across eastern England and for Northern Ireland could turn things icy. And this wet weather coming into the southwest, that will have some snow mixed in as well. You may wake up to a covering in places across parts of southwest England, and could be icy here too as temperatures drop below freezing, well below again across Scotland and northern England. Where there's any snow lying on the ground, we could get down to -12 or -13. So a frosty, icy start for some tomorrow morning, but for most it's another bright, fine, crisp winter's day. Probably a sunnier day than recent days. Some wet weather close to the south coast, perhaps affecting the Channel Isles, and more sleet and snow showers coming into eastern England. Snow showers continuing over northern Scotland. Again, it's going to be cold, just about struggling above freezing for most places, but feeling colder in the wind across the north and a brisk breeze picking up along the south coast as well. More of those snow showers coming in during Wednesday night across northern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. So again, it could be icy on Thursday morning. Still have warnings in place until Friday, actually. And then it's just another fine, bright, crisp winter's day for the majority on Thursday. Lots of sunshine. Eventually lifting the temperatures just about above freezing. But again, potentially quite icy with these snow showers coming into eastern England, northern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Temperatures still well below average and temperatures dropping quickly again through the evening.